All right. Unlucky number 13. Snowshoe just ended. Lots of interesting thoughts on that. And man, that was some good racing. And a little bit of gear news. Nothing new has really been coming out quite yet. And a couple interesting tidbits about Rebecca Henderson and Koretsky and stuff like that. Let's go.
This is Short Travel Magazine.
Short Travel Magazine.
Interesting tidbits, curated just for you.
All right, not much here for tidbits this week. One thing I noticed, I was listening to the coverage on GCN of the Snowshoe World Cup, and Rebecca Henderson came up. Everybody knows her. She used to be called Rebecca McConnell there for a while. Maiden name back to Henderson this year. And they mentioned that she was a graduate of Harvard here in the States. So I thought, that's interesting. I didn't know that. So I Googled it, and there is zero mention whatsoever of her ever attending college in the United States. Now, there is a couple Rebecca Hendersons who are in other fields and from America, and they've got all kinds of different Ivy League credentials, but not her. So I don't know if they just goofed that up on GCN. Exactly what's going on, I'm not sure. She went to school and attended college in Australia, as you would probably imagine, and that's all that's listed. But I find that interesting, so maybe they're wrong. Somebody, if anybody knows, I'd love to find out. It just kind of got me digging into some of her history. I mean, obviously she's been on the scene for years, but I didn't realize that she was second overall at the under 23 back in 2012, so 11 years ago. A lot of these, back in the day, if you will, nobody really talked about the under 23 riders very much. You didn't really hear about them until they got to the elites, and then they'd say, hey, XYZ was, won 6 World Cups in the under 23, and you go, oh boy, that's pretty good. They should be really good then in the elites. And then, of course, more often than not, they'd be back in 20th and 30th spot for a couple years before they'd work their way to the front. It's not quite like now where you hear about these racers, even as a junior, how they're doing, which is good. I mean, I always thought the under 23 should get way, way more coverage because there's some great racing, and these men and young women are definitely talented. I mean, well, just look at Mona Mitterwallner. Look at all the kind of up and comers that are in the elites now. I mean, most of them all had incredibly successful under 23 runs. So, of course, Joland Neff, did great at under 23. If I remember, I don't remember what she won off the top of my head, but I know she was very successful. So that's kind of cool. Probably should follow up on Rebecca Henderson a little more because she's had some interesting results over the last couple of years, kind of up and down, but still, it's clear the talent is there. So I'll make that something to look into. The other tidbit I noticed, and this could be more under the gear category, it probably is under but I'll throw it here anyway. Victor Koretsky, had the flight attendant on his Epic Evo bike, and in the rear shock, he had a big piece of black, looks like gaffer tape, physically holding the battery on to the unit. So I've never seen anybody with any of the access systems before. I've never even seen them use the little plastic clip thing that they started including on the GX. It actually came on my XO1 that I just picked up another system for my fat bike. The old Axis stuff. I don't have the UDH on any of my bikes. And it had the plastic guard or holder. I don't know what you'd call it. But I've never seen anybody actually use one at the World Cup level. But a piece of tape, gaffer tape on there, that should definitely hold it on. He didn't have any on the fork. Now the fork, of course, as you notice, holds the battery completely upside down. And the amount of shaking and punishment that the fork would get, I would think would be equal, if not worse, than the rear shock, which is not exactly perpendicular to the ground, but kind of, sorta. That was kind of a curious thing I noticed. But is that really a tidbit? I guess that's more of a gear thing. Other than that, I just kind of did notice overall that people are starting to kind of go back to the regular forks. Maybe the flight attendant thing was a bit of a test run the last race or two where it seemed like everybody had it. Now we're just drifting right into the gear. Sorry about that. Let's move on.
Changing gears. More new stuff we don't really need.
All right, we really did end up in the gear category. Let's just do some changing gears. Like I said, the flight attendant experiment, first of all, they all looked completely production ready, all those bikes. The last race before Snowshoe, there was the vast majority of SRAM-sponsored riders seemed to have flight attendant on there. And I noticed many of the women this time, more women than the men seemed to not have that. And they kind of went back to the regular SID forks. So who knows? It's one of those things I initially got excited about because I always thought a wireless, I'm not alone, obviously. The wireless release and implementation of a lockout would be really cool to have. Of course, it'd have to be built in to the products. They couldn't just, or maybe they can bolt it on to the existing forks, but I guess maybe it's still in the experimental phase. I saw it referenced. Joland went through a bike check on her Instagram, and she named every part on her bike, and she did not call the fork, black box, flight attendant, like they used to call things when they were experimental or prototypes. It just said 2024 RockShox SID Ultimate Flight Attendant something or other. So apparently it's a 2024 product. I thought it might be a 2025 product. Now, most of the 2024 stuff seems to have already been released. They seem to do that almost a year in advance now, but be curious. I'd love to be able to bolt something, at least just for the fork. Have just a simple, some type of a upgrade package where you could replace the damper on them and gain that wireless lockout. That would be cool. Not going to happen, and at the price of bikes currently high-end SRAM transmission level bikes, they're already insane, and tacking on another $2,000, which I'm sure they'll do for the privilege of flight attendant, probably not going to happen for me anytime in the next 10 years. So I guess we'll just forget about that for now. What else? Cannondale. Let's talk Cannondale. Their new paint job got some attention. It was pretty cool looking. It's, just the colors of their team at the moment, which are kind of a greenish, a purple, and a blue, mixed with some black on their outfits. And when I first saw it, hey, that's nice. Kind of made me reminisce about all the custom paint that I used to drool over back in the 90s. And it got me thinking, hey, wait a minute here. That looks familiar. And then I remembered my 1991, my very first high-end mountain bike. I had a cheapish Raleigh mountain bike. Went into a bike shop, saw a Kurtlow, who was still around, KurtlowCycles.com. Kurtlow.com, actually, I believe, is the domain. He had a builder. He was a builder, and he had a custom paint guy, California, who would do these handmade, crazy, paint jobs. And Doug at Kurtlow told me he would not give this guy any direction at all. He'd say, just come up with something. And he had spider webs and Anyway, the version I have, the one that I fell in love with, is in fact a black, kind of a sparkly black frame originally. And the guy used, and I'm not exaggerating, the exact same 3 shades of green, purple, and blue, and just kind of dabbed paintbrushes all over the thing. If I could show you here on the podcast, I would. Maybe I'll put a picture of it. It's beautiful. It's always been my favorite mountain bike. I used to show up at races, and the first thing everybody'd say is, wow, that's beautiful. Where did you get that done? It's a guy named Shades. Was what he used to paint on his frames. He did a lot of that type of stuff. So no wonder I fell in love with it. It actually is a 1991. I mean, the shade of green, the shade of purple, and the shade of blue is visually almost exact, which is kind of crazy. So that's kind of cool. Would I buy one? No, not just because of that, but boy, if they released them, I bet they, I don't know, sell some of them at least, because it sure looks more interesting than your solid fade black to green or solid black, which, I'm all for solid black. I have only black bikes, but man, custom paint was so cool. Maybe I'll do a special segment on that, because it was really special back in the old days, and maybe we'll get back to that. What else? Let's talk about, I see a lot of these bike checks. You see them on Pink Bike and Bike Rumors and Bike Radar. I love bike checks. At least I kind of used to. I'm starting to almost not clicking on these articles anymore because they've gotten so predictable and so boring. You see a team sponsored by Shimano. What's it going to have? You could almost, without even looking at the bike, name every component that's going to be on the bike. Same with SRAM. If you see a SRAM bike, you know exactly what's going to be on it. They all have the exact same everything. I will give Koretsky credit. He's not using a traditional controller at all for his shifting. He's got the little blip buttons only, which is kind of weird. I mean, they're so tiny. But obviously he likes them. And I could see how having more options than just the traditional giant pod that hangs off the bars. I hate the new pods. I don't like how they look. I don't like that you can't rotate them in all 360 degrees. I had one. I immediately returned it after a week. Just could not get it in a position that I like. So, of course, the only downside to using those little blips is the way it is now. You have to have a $500 blip box wired or zip tied or hidden somewhere on your bike. You actually have to run 2 wires to these things, which to me kind of defeats the whole purpose. But obviously this is all changing within the next couple years. That could very well be a simpler procedure. So that's about it. About the only thing I notice that you see different between bikes is these stems. And some of the people are using those all-in-one stem bar combos, which I'm not a fan of. That doesn't make any sense to me, especially selling them to the consumers. You're going to sell a bike to a consumer with just guessing how that person may want the bar width, the bar bends, the stem height, the stem extension. I don't know. I much prefer, it makes more sense to me to do. Now, if you want to be Nino and have a custom bars made just to your exact drop and width and all that stuff, that's cool. I mean, you maybe knock a couple grams off of your bike, but for the general public to not be able to do anything except raise and lower, and of course you're at the mercy of the manufacturer putting the right amount of spacers under that stem. If they're leaving more than 20 millimeter, you'd be lucky. I don't know. You'll see the custom Dermo aluminum stems that are, it's kind of cool. They're leaving them polished silver. They really stand out. Anton Cooper, of course, has one. And who else did I just see? I forget who had. I think it was Vlad Desculu on Trek. He also had one. Big, giant silver stem dropping the bars way, way down. But other than that, it's the most boring setups. I mean, everybody's all sponsored up. Nobody can really go changing anything. I guess everybody just gets the same stuff. So it's almost like why even bother showing these bikes anymore when they're just the most predictable things ever. I get it, but still kind of boring. What else? That's about it. There's some new, the new Mondraker bike came out, which prices are so absolutely insane. A few other new bikes came out with, one of my $7,000 for the entry level bike, and it had NX level components. NX, the cheapest, well, almost cheapest crap SRAM makes on a $7,000 bike. They could not, I think that was Mondraker actually. You could not spend, it's just, I don't know how if they can keep, I don't know how they're going to sell any bikes. I guess people are still buying the stuff or they wouldn't keep charging the money. The top Mondraker, I believe it didn't even have a dropper post, was $14,000. That's retail. $14,000 American. And if you add tax on, how much is tax on $14,000? That's another couple $1,000 practically. It's at least another $1,000. And you're talking $15,000 for a top of the line racing bike nowadays without a dropper. You throw an Axis reverb on there. Pedals, I'm sure that's no pedals. You're talking $16,000. Okay, that's insane. You should not have to spend $16,000 on a carbon race bike. I don't care what kind of parts are on it. But that's just a rant for another day. That's it. Let's get to some racing and then we should be done.
Racing news and views.
All right, lots and lots of good racing stuff. I'm kind of excited about the Gravel Worlds happening this weekend. I've done one gravel ride, casual local donut ride on my mountain bike, but I kind of enjoy following gravel racing because I feel like it's, off-road. There's dirt involved, mud sometimes, and a lot of the cross-country people, at least in this country, seem to be gravitating just as much towards gravel as cross-country. I think we'll be losing more and more dedicated cross-country racers to the Lifetime Series, which is a bummer. But what are you going to do? But, of course, Pauline Ferrand-Prévot gave up the last two World Cups. Kind of surprising. She must really be addicted to those world champ jerseys enough to just go, I'm just going to not bother flying over there and go do a world champs race. Now, she had COVID last week and skipped out on one of the European gravel champs. She was sick. So who knows how she'll be this week. I'm not even sure if she's still going to be doing it. I haven't heard anything. Haven't really looked into it. But for Americans, we've got a couple cross-country people. We got Payson McElveen, who used to be a cross-country guy, and a Keegan Swenson, Alexei Vermeulen. If you look at the list of 13 men and 10 women they're sending, it's, pretty much our best, I would say. Interesting, the elite women, there's 10, but Sophia Villafane, I'm not sure how to say that. She's not on that list of 10. Not sure why. I would think she most certainly would have qualified. She's won everything with the Lifetime Series. She's having probably one of the best years she's ever had. She's not on the list of 10. Emily Newsome, Paige Onweller, who's done some cross-country stuff, Alexis Scarda. So there's a fair amount of people who have done cross-country races heading over there, but she said she's going all in. She's going to give it her all, and I don't know, her and Keegan would be the favorites here at not almost, but any gravel race in this continent. So I'm extremely curious to see how these two do in Europe against the European pros. Now here in America, they can beat anybody seemingly on almost any race. But I'm curious how they're going to hang over there in European soil against some of these true road pros who I would think would be even more ready for gravel worlds. I don't know. Going to be great. I'm assuming I'm going to be able to watch that on a replay on GCN. I didn't actually look to see if that's on there. World champs are sometimes weird that way. But, of course, we have Snowshoe. Snowshoe was, I thought it was one of the most enjoyable, at least on the men's side, mountain bike races I've seen in a long time. Since probably last year, Snowshoe. Snowshoe, I almost get the vibe some of the European racers don't really care for it. They kind of make hints about how it's flat and yada, yada, yada. It didn't look flat to me. My God, some of those hills kind of looked relentless. I mean, they weren't a mile long, but I don't know. It looked like some of those pros were kind of spinning up them. They weren't exactly flying up them at full speed ahead always, so it looked pretty hilly to me. But to be able to, it might be an eye-opener for some course designers when they have these wide open, fast, double track, downhill. I mean, it really made for great racing. These little groups of people, of racers that would stay together, 5, 6 of them, and then another group of 6 and 8, and then a few. It kept that thing interesting all the way to the end. And some of the racers back in the second, third groups ended up at the front. Like Nino, for example, he wasn't exactly at the front of the group the whole race, but he kind of worked his way through. I don't even have to talk about Pidcock, what he was able to do with 2 tire changes, and they weren't exactly speedy tire changes. He ended up on the podium, 5th place, and he probably lost 3 minutes, of actual time just by swapping tires. So, my opinion, he undoubtedly would have probably won that thing if it wasn't for those tire changes. But hats off to Saru. I mean, of course, Nino was right there at the end. I bet he really wanted to win that. I mean, that was just pure bad timing, I think. I'm no professional racer, but he was neck and neck with Saru after those rocks, and just Saru took that one extra burst of speed right before that last turn, and I wondered if Nino had done that first, even a split second earlier, and came around that turn. I bet there'd have been a good chance Nino might have pulled that off. I'm sure he's not super. I mean, he looked bummed, of course, but second place, when you're counting points, I mean, you're down to 89 points now for Nino's lead on the overall. That is not a lot when you have the short track and the XCO both giving points out on this weekend. So, man, Nino seems to have it. He only has to kind of, I saw a list of all the scenarios that he has to kind of keep up with to win it. He has to beat somebody by 14 places and this guy by this. It's way too confusing. All he has to do is kind of stay at the front, in the top 3 to 5 in each of those races, and I believe there's nobody that could beat him at this point. But weirder things have happened. All it takes is one flat, one crash, one this or one that, and he will be second or third. And this will be his ninth overall World Cup title. That's pretty insane. If you win 1 or 2, I think you're really doing good. Look at Pauline. I don't think she's won any overalls. I mean, she seems to bail on at least a few races each year, and that's, of course, Vanderpool did the same thing. He won virtually everything one year and skipped half the races at the end, and Pidcock misses half the races, so hats off to Nino for being consistent. I will give him that. And he's going to race next year, of course, because of the Olympics. It'd be kind of cool if he won next year to go out 10 world champs, 10 overall World Cups. That'd be pretty insane. What else? The women's race was good, of course. Mona, I thought she was kind of on a roll. I don't think she was 100%, but I don't have to say much for Puck. Of course, she clinched the overall, and I think she only ended up in 6th, and that was more than enough to win. That's pretty cool. Loanna, of course, had a great day in second on a hardtail. Looked really bumpy out there, and she looked like she was kind of getting bounced around. But I've always been in the belief of I don't think your bike's going to hold you back. If you're that powerful and that strong, I don't think it really matters which bike you're riding. Personally, these aren't downhill races, so whatever. I would never do one on a hardtail again just because I'm old and hurt too much after races on a full suspension bike. So much for that. So it's going to be good. I can't wait to Friday. Friday will kind of set the tone. If Nino gets up there, maybe Saru ends up in third or something, behind Nino. Then the gap grows a little bigger, and I don't know. I don't want to wish for horrible, crappy weather, but it does sound like Saturday and Sunday it's going to be much colder and wetter in Canada there than it is right now. So I don't know. I love wetty mutt races. Muddy wet. Did I say that? Wetty mud? I don't know. Joland, of course, won last year. She kind of came out of nowhere and kicked butt. So maybe she's got another one in her. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. So what else? Overall, Snowshoe, it did not look like there was very many people there. I dare say it. I was there in 2019, as I've already mentioned, and it went right through the downtown of like their little village there. And last year it did too. And that place was absolutely packed. It was 5 deep all along the entire fences. I could hardly even see them go by. And out in the main part behind the buildings where the entire race took place this year, start, finish, everything all happened in kind of the big open area behind the village. I just didn't see that many people there, along the start-finish line, maybe a couple hundred, but I don't know, maybe just an illusion because everything was spread out. It did seem much more spread out and open. Now, there were a lot of people in the woods in that one technical section, but I don't know. I'd like to know how that kind of worked out this year with the attendance. There was seemingly less people, and maybe that's part of the reason why they're talking about using different venues next year, maybe even 2 different venues. But one thing I remember quite clearly is how expensive it was to get tickets to go up to that actual race site. I had my wife and 2 teenage daughters, and it was, if I remember correctly, right around $300. And I kind of lied about my daughter's age. I think she was 1 year over the kid rate. So it would have been well over $300. That's just to walk into the venue, which, I don't know, that seems, I know everybody's got to make a buck, but man, that hurt after already driving halfway across the country and doing all the hotels. That was an expensive trip. It was worth it. I loved it. I got some great photos, and I saw all my heroes literally within inches. You could just reach out and touch them if you were a weirdo. And it was great. But man, it has kept me away the last couple years because of the expense of getting to a place like West Virginia and Snowshoe that was so far off the beaten path that it was an hour to the nearest regular chain hotel. 1 solid hour drive from the nearest Hampton Inn or that type of a hotel. So, eek. So that's it. The series is over after this weekend. The gravel champs is over. I guess it's pretty much, for me, it's going to become, I had my last race, cross-country race of the year this past Sunday. I did okay. I didn't do very good. It was probably one of my worst years, probably out of the last 5 or 6 as far as placing goes. I just was not in shape this year to be pushing it. So that's kind of a bummer. So I got fat biking to look forward to starting next month. I believe the November 11th. Oh, no, wait a minute. I just remembered. I did sign up for the Iceman Cometh on November 4th. That is technically a cross-country race. I will be using my cross-country bike. So, okay, I guess I'm not done. I have one more. How could I forget that? So I got in the waiting list and found out 2 weeks ago that I'm in, I paid, and I'm going to have to do it. Whether the weather's crap again like in the year I did it in the past or not. And then it's fat bike. But for me, I guess I'm going to have to turn to cyclocross. Is getting going now. I really, really, really want to get up to the Trek Factory. Not this week. I believe it's 2 weeks from now. I could be wrong. Let's see, 4th, 5th, 6th. Yeah, no, that's next weekend. Not this weekend, the one after. The Trek World Cup cyclocross is going to be there. And I know there's going to be quite a few cross-country people there who are already in this country. Certainly Trek has already said some of the, I'm guessing Evie and maybe Yolanda will be there. I don't know if Gwen Gibson or I think does Maddie Monroe do cross? I don't remember. So we'll see. I used to go see Emily Batty up there. She seemed to always be there. So I'll be curious to see who goes. People that are already in the North America for the 2 World Cups. Maybe they zip over there. Either way, it's going to be fun. They have a heck of a great party up there. If anybody's ever thought about going to the Trek Factory for one of these events, it's pretty cool. There's a lot of celebrating and beer and food and screaming. And I don't know. It's a good time. And it's about 2.5 hours away drive for me, so not terrible. So maybe I'll see somebody there. I'll have my short travel hoodie and hat on. If anybody sees me, let me know. Say hi. That's about it for now for the racing. We'll wait until after Montana to make a final year-end award ceremony. I've got a couple awards I'm working on. What the heck? Should be interesting. So good luck, everybody, and I guess I'll see you next week after the final World Cup. See you later.
Thank you ever so much for listening to Short Travel Magazine.